If you are saying this government is incurably corrupt and incompetent and represents a system you want replaced, then you're anti that government. Let us not run away from what we are. Let's look at it as a badge of honor. What we are not is that we are not calling for the military to take power. We are not calling for a faction of the regime to take power. We are saying all factions of this regime have to go home. The military has to stay in the barrack, and the civilians will sort out everything that we have to sort out. How do we ensure that we don't lose more lives? If we show up in large numbers, we will not lose any lives because a million people cannot be shot at. The question about the media and whether or not there is something that we can do about the media to make our message or the movement's message. I say our because this movement clearly cannot belong to any generation. I say that with all due respect because there is no movement that arises out of a vacuum. All movements arise of social conditions that exist and that have existed historically since Kenya was created or was founded. And that throughout history, Kenyans have struggled for the same social issues that the Gen Zs are currently battling with. So there is no vacuum in the struggle, and there is no vacuum in terms of how this struggle has been fought throughout history. I was talking with Kasmuel yesterday, and one of the things that we discussed was there were victims in 1963, 1964, throughout history up to today. So when we are talking about uh, justice for the victims, we cannot only just think about the victims of June 25th. We have to think holistically, historically about all the victims, the Pio Pinto Gamas, the Tom Boyers, the Adwings Codex, the Ochukas, and more recently the Msandos, and the ones who died in 2018 when I was arrested, and the youth actually were demonstrating on the streets, and many were shot dead. Those people have not obtained justice. Or last year, when ODM was doing maandamano and many families lost loved ones. We must look at this thing holistically. But coming to the issue of the mainstream media is owned by the people we are fighting against. So let us not be deceived. The Citizen media is owned by Royal Media Group, which is owned by S.K. Macharia, who was the chairman of the campaign committee of Raila Odinga. So when Raila Odinga joins Ruto in the illegitimate coalition, clearly Citizen will start siding with Raila Odinga and William Ruto. Hence, the mistreatment of Casmuel during yesterday's show. So we have to see this in context. When you look at the nation, the editorial director of the nation was paid school fees for by Raila Odinga. He has loyalty to Raila Odinga personally. So you don't expect the Daily Nation to start covering these things in a balanced way. Look at CNN. Who is the anchor or the reporter for CNN? Has done a great job so far, Larry Mado. But what did he do in 2018 when I was trying to talk about revolution? He shut me up. These are people whose origins and DNA are rooted in the cabal system in Kenya that we need changed. So don't expect anything different from them. In any event, the social media is currently the leading media in the entire world, accounting for more than 80% of media traffic. So once we dominate the social media and we disseminate our information in the social media, We can disregard the mainstream media. We will still encourage people who are invited to go there and deconstruct them. But don't focus on the mainstream so called media. That media is dead and dying. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the issue that I don't know whether it was Professor Chiang, but he mentioned that they are having petitions and constitutional challenges in court and blah, blah, blah. And they want to amend the constitution to ensure that Ruto can go without anybody being on the street. With all due respect, a misguided and wrong headed strategy. Law, and I'm talking here as a veteran lawyer of 30 years standing, law is an instrument of power. Power is not an instrument of law. So, law and the judiciary serves the state. You don't expect an instrument of the state to declare that a regime should go home when that regime was elected, even if that regime becomes illegitimate before 2 years, like this one. So going to court is wrong headed when you are dealing with Article 1 of the Constitution, where the people have uh, recalled the legitimacy they donated to the government in power. And they are saying they now want to exercise their sovereignty directly. Don't go to court for any interpretation of Article 1 because you will not win. No court will declare this government illegal. No court will tell Ruto to go home. If you're declaring such orders, we need to have you rebooted to the default because you're not going to get those orders. There is no court in the world that will give you those orders. So it's a waste of time. We need to focus our attention to what is important right now, which is the popular movement on the streets. Let's be very clear here. Because if we are not clear, we will not be able to achieve what actually is imminent. You're trying to reform this thing. It's like taking deodorant and using it on a skunk. The the odor that is going to come out of there is worse than the natural skunk, the odor of the natural skunk. So let's not do it. The third point I wanted to make, there is nothing wrong with people saying we are anti government. We are. We want Ruto to go with his government and his regime. So there's nothing wrong by people saying these things are anti government demonstrations. Let's embrace that. Yes, they are inherently anti government. If you are saying this government is incurably corrupt and incompetent and represents a system you want replaced, then you're anti that government. Let us not run away from what we are. Let's look at it as a badge of honor. We are anti government. We want to replace it. We want it to go. How else do you say that? What we are not is that we are not calling for the military to take power. We are not calling for a faction of the regime to take power. We are saying all factions of this regime have to go home. The military has to stay in the barrack, and the civilians will sort out everything that we have to sort out. The third point, because I think a statement was made about this, I agree with the statement, but I don't think that we got it clearly what the financial and economic situation in the country is. I was telling someone yesterday that if you go to a bank and you want to take a loan or a mortgage, you want a house, they will do an analysis of what your income is and what your expenses are per month and then per year. And if the mortgage is going to take more than 40% of your income, you will not qualify for the mortgage. I mean, you will simply not qualify for the mortgage because you will have other things that you are going to take care of other than the mortgage. So, which means you will default. Here, we are told that Kenya is using 65% of revenue to pay foreign debt and mainly to pay interest. In fact, to pay exclusively interest, which means these are only interest only loans. An interest only loan is a loan where it doesn't matter how long you pay it, you will never be able to touch the principal, which means this debt is in perpetuity. It's an illegal debt because no debt should be in perpetuity. No mortgage runs more than 25 years. So anything that runs more than 25 years has to be legal. But they're telling us this is a debt anti into perpetuity. Then they're telling us if you take 65% to service the interest, what is left there? What is left there is 35%, right? This 35% is not just going into development. In fact, zero goes into development because it 30% goes to recurrent expenditure, the salaries, the benefits, the per diems, the 200 million Ruto tax for jets to Washington, their first lady's office, the second lady, the third lady, the first daughter, whatever you want to call them. So then the country gets zero towards development. I'm not even talking about what is stolen. I'm now only talking about what they are saying. Then you have to account for the 2 billion per month that Despot Uhuru said was being stolen every month from our money. Then you know this is what anarchy looks like. They were saying it is the Gen Zs and the patriotic revolutionaries on the streets that were calling for chaos and anarchy. But what do you call this? This is economic anarchy. Because if you cannot come out of the debt trap and you cannot put any money towards development, then how can this be sustainable? How can anybody say this economy will create jobs? This economy will give us universal health care. This economy will be able to provide for quality education. This economy will be able to build roads. All these things they are telling us is just being done on credit. So all this is debt. Yet, the same people are telling us, and the Auditor General has told us, and other investigative forensic experts have told us, more than 2.5 trillion was stolen in the last 10 years and is sitting in offshore accounts. And they don't want to go get that so that they can clear the debt and be able to develop our country. And this is deliberate. So when you see Raila and the rest joining in with grade D former governors, some of whom are in court for corruption, such as Oparanya, they want to support each other because without this system that is incurably defective and cannot be reformed, they cannot survive. That is why an overhaul is inevitable. An overhaul is the only thing that can be done and must be done. I like what Benji Ndolo said, that we target even 800,000. That's a lot of people. But as much as 5 million or 10 million, because everybody in Kenya is tired. It is not right to say that that's all we can be able to gather, because as Ndolo correctly said, Martin Luther King gathered 1 million before Kenya got its independence. So if he was able to gather 1 million, there was no social media. And he was not even as organic, that organization, as this one. And the situation was dire, yes, but it was a different century altogether, almost. It was many, many decades ago. How can we fail in this day and age to be able to have even 5 million people in Nairobi when we are organized, when we can get together and hire buses and matatus, when we can loan each other money so that they can get transportation, when we can accommodate each other, when we can source for support from others who are as disgusted as we are towards this regime. We cannot fail. What I want to emphasize is that we cannot fail. And I finish where Marco Ure had finished the last time, he asked the question, how do we ensure that we don't lose more lives? And the answer is simple. If we show up in large numbers, we will not lose any lives because 1 million people cannot be shot at. 1 million people can march into State House and Ruto will be nowhere to be seen. 1 million people is a huge number. So our security is in our numbers. So basically, I'm trying to emphasize that we should do whatever we have to do to mobilize electronically using our social media handles, physically, and whatever way, so that we get these numbers and then we can remove these guys from power. Then we can be able to restructure and overhaul our state. I land there.